All right,
Go real quick.
now we're recording.
Now we're going, okay, call to order the meeting of the PZC Regulatory Review Committee, June 13th, 2:03 PM. Members present are Cooley, Corsi, Aho, Witch, and we have minutes from May 9th.
Yes, Mr. Chair, they're on the screen.
Move to accept the minutes as written.
Moved by Corsi,
Second.
second by Cooley, all in favor. Passes unanimously. I need to leave at 3 o'clock, so I am anxious to hear what we have from our consultant. So let's let Michael start. And you can continue the discussion after I leave. Who wants to take over after I leave?
Do you want me to share my screen through the
I don't-
Yes.
Yeah,
slides?
I do your presentation.
All right,
you have privileges.
let me just pull it up and I will let you know.
Cool.
It seems like it's going to work. Yep. Okay. Maybe it's going to work. Share. Yeah. It's like I've never used a computer before and I haven't shared my screen 3,000 times since 2020.
You know,
That's
you need
thinking.
now, so, and it doesn't.
Here we go. Okay. Share.
That looks promising.
Hey.
All right.
We're starting. All right. It's almost like this was how it was supposed to go. Okay. So you may recall from our discussion with the full commission that one of the next steps that we wanted to kind of start working through in parallel now that we're sort of underway with the new reorganized set of regs was just this idea of multifamily housing. We've got some changes to the inclusionary zoning language that we've looked at. We have some moratoriums that were previously written. You've previously talked about accessory dwelling units and high density housing, and you've had some applications before you. And I would say that if I'm getting any feedback or having any discussion about the town of Mansfield, whether it's from a commission member, a staff member, someone that I know, someone in the application world, the attorney world, it always comes back to multifamily housing. It just always, that's where a lot of this activity seems to stem from, and a lot of the discussion. So it felt like an appropriate next step. So the first thing that we did after, and as we explained at the last time, at the last meeting, was to kind of do an evaluation. We want to do a gut check of where everything is and high level comparison. So I started by just putting a few data points here because I think it frames the conversation. 57 and all things that I'm sure you already know, but 57% of the housing stock is single family, 38% housing stock multi-family, 84% of renters are cost burdened, while just 23% of owners are cost burdened. And that stood out to me because that is quite a disparity. I think with a lot of towns, you see the level of the residents' level of being cost burdened is much closer together. Renters spend about 48% of their annual income on housing, while owners spend just 12%. Again, I think that's quite a deviation. And 8% of the total housing stock falls into, I think, what we would call in many ways middle housing, which is that 5 to 20 unit threshold, right? Which tells us sort of this trend which you're seeing, which is to larger, more intense development. The next piece to this, which I did send along, I think you may have or have access to if you don't have it in front of you, everything put together on one sheet, but this makes it a little bit easier to follow. We went through and compared all of the pertinent zones and the criteria within each zone, because again, we wanted to see kind of where are the similarities and where are the differences, and then sort of ask questions about where those differences lie, right? So the first one, minimum parcel size, and we've got it here for these first three zones, which you know from the bulk table and the zoning regs. Next one's a little bit more interesting, density, 8.7 units an acre. Over here, 15 units an acre. We indicated whether or not the specific housing type is allowed in that zone, and then included specific location and siting criteria if there were standards that need to be met. Looked at the front yard setback because that's something that we have received feedback on previously from property owners. The maximum height, and if mixed use is allowed, and then what the process is. So there's 3 total slides, and like I said, the table they're all listed on one sheet, which I think you have. But they do, there is a bit of a spread, right? In certain areas here, you've got just on this sheet between 25 feet and 200. And then looking at the next set of zones, same thing, a lot of them carry through to this density of approximately 8.7 units an acre. But there's again, quite a spread between, for example, the front yard setback. You'll see between the zones, your heights, your allowable heights, maybe 35, 40, or 45. So not a huge difference, but not also consistent. And then, some of these other pieces here with which types of housing are allowed. So again, these are the PB zones. So again, a little bit more density is allowed, 15 and up to 35 or 100. But we're looking at, again, some mild differences in something like height, 4 stories, 40 feet, 3 stories, and then these tiered front yard setbacks. So at this point, I'm not you guys, so I don't know the specific intent for these very minor nuances. But one of the things that we certainly want to make sure is very clear, and one of the focus points for us will be moving forward, is are these data points and this level of nuance, is it necessary and was it intentional? If the answer is yes, then great. If the answer is we're not really sure, then I think we want to reduce that when at all possible. Looking at some of these other ones, the difference between 40 feet and 3 stories, for example, or the difference between 40 feet and 35 feet and 45 feet, right? This is very minor. And we want to clean that up if it's not intentional. I'm going to take a breath just to make sure nobody has questions, or if I should just shut my computer down and walk away now, I'll do that.
The one thing, I think the one intentional area is the PB4 King Hill Road. I think those heights, that density was extremely intentional when you first, because when I drove the van and we all went around and we went to all of the apartments in Mansfield, and we knew that, we wanted multifamily somewhere, and everyone arrived at King Hill and they saw at the time, the new STEM dorm was going up, and they said, hey, if we want density, this is where it belongs. And so that was extremely intentional.
So the other reason why this is an important sort of piece of information, and again, the other benefit is it pulls this information out of the regs and makes it a little more accessible to those participating that aren't sitting on this committee or the full commission. But to use the example that I think would be most familiar would be, so like looking at PVRA and the setback of 200 feet, right? We know that there are people in that area that feel that that's very restrictive. And so we know it's 200 feet. We know that that there are people that think that that's too restrictive, and the commission will have to make a decision at some point, right? We're moving in the direction of looking at that number and deciding where do we go? Do we hold the line with the original intent when this was crafted, if there is one and we still agree with it? Or and effectively tell the folks that don't like that number, this is what we feel is appropriate, or we're going to move in a different direction. So at the very least, this is a baseline for those conversations and us making a determination as to whether or not they are appropriate, and or if we want to evaluate them further as we get feedback. So the next sort of chunk of slides is the other thing that we kind of talked about, which is just wanting to provide you with, really provide your eyes with examples of developments that are within our region, climate zone, state, that are not high density, 4+ stories, cram them in there type developments. And that's not to say that those types of developments are bad, but I think you know what they look like. So what we're trying to do based upon the feedback we've received at this point is show you what else is possible. Because we want diversity, if nothing else. And we already know that the market is generating a specific demand for a specific type of housing you've all seen. So we want to look at the alternatives. So I'm just going to take you through these to hopefully help us get that impression. So this development is called Riverwalk. It's based in Concord, Mass. On the right is sort of a high-level conceptual type of drawing to give you a sense of how the development was conceived. The middle is a photo of the development as constructed, and the left is an aerial. It's 14 units on 4.6 acres and is approximate, so which generates approximately 3 units an acre per density. This checks a lot of boxes from a housing type perspective. It also provides smaller homes for those that don't want large lots, provides community style living. And this is actually adjacent to a river area and not in some far off reach of town, sort of densely populated and well developed, but it shows that you can really get something like this in a small area. That you don't need to have 50 acres of developable land that don't have wetlands and ledge and all these other things. I think it's a really good example, and they have a great project website for more info, which we can pull. The next one is called The Grand. It's based in Granby. It's 206 units, 34 acres, approximately 6 units an acre. This one, it may be a little bit hard to see, but is we pulled it because it's got multiple housing types. So if you look at this piece on the right, you'll see on the right-hand portion of this, your higher density stuff, which is shown in the photo on the left, with amenities. And then sort of as a second piece, they've got more traditional detached housing, typical with kind of what we're used to seeing, but still providing that those amenities. But again, one development, multiple options, and not too far away. Third is called The Ridge. It's based in Simsbury, 280 units, 35 acres, about 8 units in density. Again, the same idea in that the overall development of the site includes multiple housing types. So you're dealing with more of a townhouse style, which is the photos that you see, and then some higher density stuff. And this is how you really make the numbers work from a development perspective, because they know what they need, everything, they know what their densities need to be to make the finances work. So you allow them some of that density so that they can get it there, but then we get these other housing types to really provide for that choice, and either the transition in or transition out housing stock that I think we're all trying to focus on. Another example is Preserve at Great Pond in Windsor, 296 units, 50 acres, 6 unit density, same idea, more of a traditional style development here on the bottom piece with some townhouse and higher density stuff in the front. This is part of an overall very massive development called the Preserve at Great Pond is what they're calling this, but there is a sort of a larger scale name. They've referred to it as it has all been developed with a form-based code. It is incredibly optimistic, and I don't know they're going to see everything that they're asking for from the mixed use side. But from a housing perspective, and this photo on the right is constructed. So they are seeing that, and again, really trying to hammer on these things are possible. We don't want to write regs that are going to just sit on the books.
Mike, the large apartment complex, that's the only one that has been built thus far?
I don't know where they stand as far as construction. I wanted to show completed so that we could get a sense of what it would look like from an aesthetic standpoint, but I can find out where they stand from a permitting standpoint.
Yeah, it's okay. I was just curious.
Yeah, there's a bunch there. This whole area in Windsor, I mean, they're just sort of jamming. So there's a lot there, but I'm not sure which developments are part of the preserve and which are unassociated, but that one at least is constructed. This is a little bit different. This is called the Ledges in Madison. This was a very small parcel, 1.8 acres, and there was an existing building on the property. And what they basically did was try to design all of this based upon sort of a carriage house feel. So you've got four buildings, 7 units, but it is sort of a very high end. This is obviously not falling into the category of like affordable housing or entry level housing stock, but again shows that housing doesn't have to look the same, right? This provides some increased density. There were some buildings that were going to remain, but then also provides options from a more of a townhouse or condo perspective. This is right along the post road. So again, it's not tucked away in some far off land. It's just giving a bit of that diversity and some of that community living, which a lot of people are looking for. This one, if you're a zoning nerd, and I won't ask anybody to raise their hands to tell me which one of you call yourself zoning nerds, but you are on the reg review committee. So maybe there's an FYI there. You may have seen this. This is part of an application that was submitted by the Open Communities Alliance to the town of Woodbridge. They found Woodbridge was effectively prohibiting all development beyond single family. They submitted an application to the commission with this. This is the site plan and these are the renderings, effectively with the intent of it being denied purely to then take them to court on the grounds that their regs were did not meet statute and did not meet all the other case law and mandates and everything that we hear about all the time. So this was their demonstration that you could build a single structure within the confines of the current regs that would look and act and feel like a single family home, but it wasn't. So this was a 4-unit single structure on 1.2 acres with the required amount of parking and septic. They showed everything being feasible. And you'll see the floor plan there, basically 4 single family units. They were up and down. So they had, I don't know how many bedrooms total. But again, another alternative to construction so that we don't necessarily need to change the way that things feel to be providing access to housing choice. So I just did a spoiler alert. What does that mean? And what I think it means is that you guys should seriously consider hitting pause. I think it is very hard to think thoughtfully about what you want to do and evaluate all of the potential considerations when you are being hammered with inquiries and applications. The sense that I keep getting from all the different folks that we've talked to this point is that you feel a bit overwhelmed. We don't necessarily love everything that the regulations have facilitated to date. And that may be an uneasiness from a design standpoint, it may be an uneasiness from a density, from a location, maybe all of it. But we are not going to be as effective as we can be if we're trying to solve this problem, while these things continue to make their way through the pipeline. And I realize that the request here, which would be for consideration of a temporary high-density housing development moratorium, short duration, 6 months, for very limited and specific purpose, is scary, but I think it is a very worthy proposition, at least considering. And the starting scope here, sort of just where we're used to use as a springboard, would be 5 total units. So any development of in excess of 5 total units, or a development with a density greater than 3 units per acre. Given that we are severely lacking in the age-restricted realm, there's language at the bottom there for something that if it were to come in as a 50% age-restricted or greater, then it would not be subject to that. But that's where we kind of are at this point, and I want to stop sharing my screen, and I want to hear from you guys. I can go back to it, but
I would like just to add a couple things, just to kind of put some numbers to what you all are looking at. So right now you've got the standard at Four Corners is 392 units. The golf course project, aka 497 Middle Turnpike, is 262 units. Backing up, the standard is 392 units, 35 units of which will be affordable. We got a 1.7% fee in lieu. Golf course, 262 units, 39 of which will be affordable, and then 5% workforce housing. You've got Eagleville Green, which is 42 units, 34 of which will be affordable. You have a wetlands license, two wetlands licenses in the queue. The first one is, or the first, actually 3 wetlands licenses. The first 2 are 541, 555 Middle Turnpike. That's the Christmas tree farm and the property to the east of that.
Is that kind of behind hops and all of that? Is it that one?
No.
Oh, that's another one.
Oh,
That's another one. So, and I should back up to talk about that one. So that's the wetlands license. That's about 120-ish units with a little bit of mixed use in there. You've got also a live special permit for the villages at Four Corners, which is within the toast, and that's 116 units with 17.7, about 17 affordable units. In addition, you also have a wetlands license for, they're coming in at about 1,170 beds, because it's coming in under the group dwelling regulation, because it's in King Hill Road. So, but if you translate that to units, that is about, I don't know, 400 to 450 units, I think. So if everything were to be approved, I didn't include not including the
Ones that are only at wetlands. We're looking at only the ones that have already gotten to planning zoning, because Wilmerite has to come back because they changed their project design.
yeah.
But if it's just those, I think the number you tossed out, I think.
Well, if it's the standard, the golf course, Eagleville Green, and King Hill Road, that's about almost 1,100 units.
So those are ones that would not be subject to the moratorium.
King Hill, if they do not get their application in prior to how that goes, when that goes into effect, they would not be subject.
I could see exempting them, because I don't think King Hill
I don't
causes any problem.
think legally we could do.
We can do, we can
You can exempt
leave
PB4.
PB4
that.
out.
We could do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't do an applicant.
No.
Right, so,
And
Yeah.
considering
Yeah.
the zone is already marked as the extremely high density zone, I
Yeah.
think it's probably a
Yeah.
pretty solid footing to say
It's
we're fine with high density there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we, if we choose to do this, how soon can we get it on the calendar? Can we get it for the 20th?
You could schedule a public hearing for the 20th. I mean, you could have it received and then schedule a public hearing for the 17th.
So
Is
I
So-
think
is
you have
6
enough.
months the correct amount of time? 6 months seems short.
well, so you can always extend it. My thought would be, there's been some, to allay any concerns from anybody who may feel that this is not development friendly, or this is going to have negative impacts on those folks. And by the way, my response to that is being development friendly is an important consideration, but your first charge is to be Mansfield friendly. And Mansfield is not a town of developers. So we have a lot of things we need to do, and that is one of them. But we need to make sure that development is appropriate, and making our regs as transparent as possible means that when you do have a developer, it is friendly because they're building what you've very clearly asked for. And so I think that makes the translation from your side of the table to an applicant's side of the table happen more efficiently. So I would agree that this does that. 6 months keeps that moving. Jennifer, of the units that you just outlined, so what is the sense, approximately how many of them would be affordable? I was trying to take notes, but
So, well,
100?
is the net greater or less than 10% of the total, would you say?
it will be about 10% all in, I think, because
I'm just trying to get a sense of,
10 to
will
12%,
you-
I would say.
okay, so it will move the needle a little bit on your total percentage of housing, because you're 6.3, because you have 6,000 housing units and you're going to put another 1,000 on the books or whatever it is. So
Yeah.
if you're not adding the 10, your percentage goes down.
Really move the needle, you need massive subsidies like South Eagleville. And that took 10 years to put together. I
Or
mean,
15%.
hopefully more will come in like that, but it's extremely difficult to move the needle.
Or
Yeah,
higher.
for sure.
It seems to me like this is the exact right time to do this. Well,
Yeah.
the exact right time might have been 6 months ago, but we have Tyke now on retainer, which this is
Yeah.
how we can move on that.
So that helps us accomplish something within the 6 months.
Yep.
Okay.
So from the planning department side of where we think applications are, right? So applications that are currently only under a wetlands application will be torpedoed by this. So if they could hypothetically submit their special permit application, it can't be acted on. It would require wetlands to get through immediately and then turn around and get through all the planning review very quickly. I don't know that that would really be feasible in the amount of time these things normally take. Jen, you have a better sense of where the Four Corners development is and whether or not.
The villages, they have some redesigning to do, but their public hearing does not have to close until September 29th. So I have a feeling that they're going to go back to the table, do some redesigning, and then as long as they close the public hearing by September 29th, they're in good shape. I just did the calendar with them yesterday.
One thing that Mike said in his presentation that I have been thinking a lot about is you mentioned there's no point in making rules as planners if people won't build the things that you are designing for. And this is something Julene and I have talked about a lot because particularly when we're out talking to builders in the field and we're doing their inspections about what they will build, it's really critical that whatever we design, people will still build it. Because if they don't, we go from having too much development to nothing. Because we functionally kill it, even if we in spirit don't.
Like, for example, if we wanted 75% affordable houses and no subsidy from anyone,
That's
It's not gonna
this
happen.
won't happen. Yeah.
Right. So how do we get there, Mike? Do we bring in developers and do we bring in financial analysts to explain what the realities of the housing market are?
So I think that something that may be helpful, and I mentioned this, I can't remember, I know I mentioned it to Jennifer. I also do work for the town of Tolland, and they are in the final stages of accepting, I guess would be the word, because you don't approve a report, but they have had a financial analysis essentially for multifamily housing prepared by I don't know, their feasibility analysis consulting company. He's based in Massachusetts, but it's trying to understand the current market, but also the ability for these units to be digested by the market, because everybody's trying to be, get their foot in the door. They don't necessarily know that you have 1,200 units in the hopper, and when they run their numbers, those calculations may not account for that, and you don't want to have everybody building at the same time and then end up with a bunch of empty rooms. So I think that there will be a lot in there that may be helpful in this discussion, and I think they'll probably have it finalized, and it'll be public in the next few weeks. And it may be something that you guys want to replicate. There may be stuff we can do and pull from it, but yeah, I think there is a component of this that includes the private side. But different people are going to be willing to do more on the side of sort of building what it is that the town wants. Some developers build exactly what they want to build. They don't change it. They have their model, and that's just the end of it. And other people are more willing to do that. So I think it's going to depend a little bit on kind of where we want to go. But that's why a lot of what we've shown you today, still has some flexibility, so that the traditional thing that they know very well and they can crunch the numbers on, we're still allowing some of that, because we want the projects to be viable. So it's a matter of creating a more formal give and take.
I think that you're not going to see any relief in the four corners. Like if you want, whatever, you're not going to see a lot of change in the applications in the four corners. The ones that the only ones that may not come in or work would be the 541, 555, I think. I don't know when, what stage they are in their design. And, certainly that would be an interesting thing to bring them in, bring those developers in and ask them, like, what is it that this is what we want. What do you want? How do we find something in the middle? I think what it is going to do is get us on the parcels that we don't really understand that are out there yet.
Right.
Coming in with a lot of this higher density stuff, like in the RAR 90, for example. Maybe there's a few other in the four corner, few other parcels in that four corners sewer service area that would fall into that, because that's pretty prescribed, that RAR 90, where you can build things. You already have a moratorium on DMR and PDRA, and it certainly would, the parcel to the adjacent to Timber Drive, that would also impact that one as well. Yep.
So that sounds like a good idea to me, to have a moratorium and to.
But what
take a
is this?
closer look.
But what is the scope? Because I think I think you need to kind of come to a consensus in this group as to if you want to have a moratorium, and then you need to decide what the scope is, so that we get
Geographic scope, or
zone scope, the type of housing you want. Is it age restricted? Is it not age restricted? What is Mike, could you put the thing that you had up?
Yep.
I mean, that statement is what we need to give Tyke direction to, so they can write something up and have it received for Tuesday.
That discrepancy between renters and owners for about percentage of income going to housing, how does that get it fixed? Is that
If people sell their houses they built for $10,000 50 years ago?
which, well, in some ways it does, doesn't it? It has to do with creating housing that those people want to move into,
Right.
which is actually creating different housing that is then owner occupied.
There are a lot of seniors looking for.
Right. So how do we do that?
Yes.
have to build more housing.
Right,
There's
but
a shortage of housing.
and I guess, but all of what's come before us has been rental properties.
Well, if it's
And-
the renters
that's
are
a good point.
the most cost burdened. Right. So I
Yes.
think because the rents are so high in this town.
We need to encourage condos too.
But I
And
think
hope that
there,
developers never want to do a condo. Why?
Condo associations are hell, is what I've heard. Honestly.
I'm from Florida,
But-
you're right.
And co-ops, another potential
another place where you have to get along with
other
people you don't
people.
choose, like to be part of your group.
What is Freedom Green? That's not
It's a condo.
condos, is it? It is
It's a
condos,
condo,
okay.
that works.
People
Yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
That is also being, there's a lot of rentals.
That's a
There.
good example of something that's middle housing and working.
When we did our van tour, that was one of the places you all really liked.
Yeah. super
Is-
interesting.
Is there a disproportion between renter and,
I think the age demography is what explains a lot of that.
okay,
That's my guess.
like, do we need more lower end properties to purchase? Do we need a different, or,
Well,
or,
so sorry to interrupt, but doesn't that go back to the discussions that we've had about lot sizes?
yes,
That goes back to that.
Right.
So, if we're in our RAR 90 and we have our 90,000 square foot lots, that is the basis of your problem,
yes,
right? And, we have talked about figuring out areas or zones in which we could have, say, 20,000 square foot lots, or possibly even smaller, and we have not really pursued that, but that might be one way
Yeah.
to.
I think
go
that
do
should be part of our scope.
yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
To look at places where we could put. 10,
Smaller lot zoning.
20,000.
Mhm.
Land costs are very high right now, though. There's parcels for over $100,000 that are just, just over an acre. And now, when you build something on top of that, it's not gonna be affordable overall.
Yeah, but
Because
if
the
we
cost
could,
of the land,
Yeah.
if we divide that into 4 pieces, then
that helps.
spread that
Yes.
cost down. And we shouldn't ignore naturally occurring affordable houses either.
We don't have this market, if you go to Rolling Hills, that is no longer naturally current. I mean, it used to be able to get in there for well under 100.
Mhm.
It's now like, talk to Katie Fertoni and
it's just-
Will Beagle.
250.
But part of,
250.
Really?
part of the reason for that is that we
Manufactured
prohibit
houses.
any more rolling hills.
Well, and the expansion.
So maybe we should look at allowing more mobile home parks too.
That'll go over well in town.
People love that idea, right?
Well, what about a tiny home community?
Exactly,
We have to call it something else.
right, you can't have a mobile home, but there are other housing
Manufactured
options
housing.
Well,
The other thing that is worth mentioning is that, so for example, if you look at this, and this is 14 units, 4.6 acres, not a big piece. Let's say this was done as strictly rentals. If the town took $250,000 from its housing trust fund, and you used that money over a period of 10 years, 20 years, 5 years to reduce rents across each of those units by $1, $100, or $1,000, whatever it equates to being. For the duration of that agreement, those qualify as affordable housing units. They are government subsidized units, and that qualifies towards your 10%. You don't need to use the funds specifically to build a 40-year fully restricted unit. You can use those funds to reduce the costs of existing units or to buy down permanent restrictions. But if it's not permanent, it'll qualify towards the 10% for those times. So you may find that we want 50% of those units to be rentals, and you're going to rent them for X. And let's say the affordable threshold is $1,500 a month and the market is $1,800 a month. And so the town is going to pay the delta for a period of 20 years. And we're going to use the housing trust fund to do that. You could do that, and those funds would be, you could spend those funds on that.
That's the decisions town council needs to make, though. That's not in our purview.
Well, you can zone it so that you then
Encourage that.
encourage that, right? But council does make that.
Yeah, just jump in.
How do you change the zoning regs to
Yeah.
encourage that?
Creative way. I know.
We are talking always about new buildings.
Mm.
Can't we do the same thing to some of the old ones that are already out there? Can't we take some of that money and just go to the
Town
owners
council.
of some of the old ones?
Town council could. And
Are you talking about old
Either buy
Existing.
Existing
ones.
multifamily or,
Yeah.
Yeah, like a-
the
a
apartment co-
Redwood or
The
a.
Redwoods is an
Yeah,
example. I mean, they're gonna look shabby compared to what's being built around them. They're gonna need some money for redevelopment. They don't have to give us all of them. And you know, when you're talking about, what is that, Eagleville or whatever? You told me at the last meeting, it's like $300,000 or $400,000 a unit.
I think it was higher.
It's like over 4.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what an apartment complex around here would do if we said you can have $100,000 per unit to put a deed restriction on it?
Well, and
I
it
mean-
seems like that short-term idea that Michael just talked about gives the town, should they be willing to do it, money, time to develop like an enterprise fund that the town can create
And,
to put
and,
monies into that.
and the difference between that and what here, every time we do one of these things, we're expanding the denominator.
Yeah,
If you go to existing materials, the denominator stays the same. You can jab that percentage up a lot easier.
Good point. Maybe we should take this back to the Affordable Housing Commission
Yeah.
and have them take it to town council as an idea.
So. Lots of things we can do. But. What do we want to do for Monday?
Right, I think we should do the moratorium. I think 6 months seems reasonable. I think excluding PB4 seems reasonable.
Especially if we can extend it.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I agree.
We can always extend it.
We can always extend it, and I think that would give us some breathing room to think about this. It also doesn't really change much that's already, that's in the queue.
So the the moratorium it would be a temporary and limited moratorium applicable to any multiple unit development in excess of 5 total units with a density greater than 3 units per acre, excluding developments within the PB4 or those which are at least 50% age restricted.
I think that sounds reasonable, and it might change the needle on developments that aren't even considering being age restricted.
And maybe
Go that
that'll
way.
encourage people to do
Right.
units of 5 house units, 4 house units. Trying to
Yeah,
get
that'd
under
be
that.
interesting.
So if you can't build 400, maybe you want to build 4.
I think the other thing that is really important to make sure that everybody understands, particularly people that have concern about this, is the commission is under no obligation to change the regs, and the commission isn't under no obligation to set, this does not assume that we throw out the regs that are on the books. The only thing we have to do is take some period of time, not to exceed 6 months, to thoughtfully review the regulations and make sure they still reflect your intent, right? We're just doing a bit of a gut check. We don't need to throw out what we have. This does not determine the fate of all of those things. So for those concerns, if what's on the books is reasonable and it was done with intent and it will encourage what you're looking for, then it can stay.
So I think we need a motion. Our chair has to,
So I would entertain a motion for the moratorium.
I can try. Let's see if I can. Oh, no, hang on. Pull it back up. Got it.
do you want Mike to just put it back up?
Mike, put it back up.
I've got it.
Stand by.
I've got it in front of me. Okay, so I'll give it a shot at this. Cooley would put forward a motion to discuss with the full commission a limited 6-month moratorium on high-density housing to give Mansfield the opportunity to examine current regulations, consider findings of affordable housing plan, Northwest Mansfield neighborhoods plan or facility study, and modify if needed current regulations to discourage the housing types the town feels are less appropriate and encourage the housing types that are more needed. Where this would be applicable to any multi-unit development in excess of 5 total units or with density greater than 3 units per acre, excluding those in the PV4 and developments which are at least 50% age restricted.
Beautiful. Moved by Cooley,
Second.
second by Corsi. Any discussion? In favor? Okay, passes unanimously. Good. I think we're on a good road.
It might be helpful for the public to make a list of should this be approved, this moratorium, which of the current
Yes,
developments are gonna be,
Yeah, that would.
ones that
still going forward, yeah,
that'll calm some people down and
yeah.
How much?
Yep.
not much.
That's
Hey.
optimistic.
Can you do something for me too? I've been hunting for it. I can't find it. The last time we talked about affordable housing, or the first time we talked about
Oh, you're
affordable
gonna,
housing,
yeah,
they had a memo
yep,
from Realtor Steve Ferrigno
yep.
that talked about all alternatives. Could you send me a copy of that, and maybe the rest of the group too?
Sure.
Resend that Ferrigno memo to everybody.
Yep.
Because it looked at other ways of doing this besides just this way.
Well, I think affordable housing is it's a big topic, right?
Yep.
You are one
Piece.
piece. I would say you're like 30% of the piece.
Yep.
Okay, then there's a ton of funding out there that is also a piece. Then there are also developers out there, like nonprofit developers, that's a piece. There's so there's just a lot of stuff. There's our housing trust fund, the council, they can choose,
Yeah, but to get to 10% with a 15% requirement, we'd have to have 4,500 more units.
yep. But you're only one part of the piece. You're only one part
I
of the
hope
puzzle.
so.
Yeah,
You're
we
only
don't-
one piece of the puzzle.
There's other ways of getting.
Yeah,
there.
and we're gonna have to look at that, right? I mean, it's gonna, and it's comprehensive. And if you talk to a lot of affordable housing experts, they said you're probably not gonna make it to 10%, but you're just gonna be pushing forward, right?
But we are the guys that are gonna give them a significant chunk of change that could help the other people get there.
Yep.
In other words, if we don't collect a sufficient amount and put into that account, they're not gonna have that account to use in other ways.
Yeah, we can
So I
help.
think we're kind of
We can
important.
help. We can help. We can definitely.
Yeah, you are very important.
Yeah, I think it's also important to take the perspective too, that we are not alone in the state. Every town in the state is in the same boat.
Yeah, yeah.
There is no town in the entire state that has met their 10%.
Oh, no,
Notwithstanding.
no,
I don't think so.
there's a bunch of towns.
So.
No, there's a
Are
bunch.
There are some? that
Yeah,
have-
there's a
Okay.
table in the internet and there's a bunch of them that
Okay,
have.
good to know, good
Yeah.
to know. But there also has been very limited action in the state legislature to try to help
Yep.
towns and give more tools to meet this.
Yep.
So it's not just that it's hard, it's that it's hard and we're not getting a lot of help from the state either.
And the funny thing is too, we've been going backwards. I mean, if you look at the table from 2010,
But that's what it is, they're changing.
2010, we were over and we've just
But
kind
they've
of slipped
changed how
back
they,
since.
how they calculate too. That's a calculation change.
Yeah, that
Is
didn't
it?
help us. They
Oh,
changed the
yeah.
calculation.
Oh, I
They
didn't
moved
know
the
that.
goalposts.
Mhm.
They did, huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know that.
I'm gonna go to Logan.
Okay,
Luann, you take over.
Bless you.
I will be back just in time for Tuesday's meeting.
Great.
okay,
Taking a red eye from Seattle on Monday night. I'll be here for Tuesday's meeting.
all right. I hope it, yeah.
I got a very important high school graduation grandson to get to.
Oh, great, very cool.
And if I don't make it there, I'd be in big trouble.
Yes.
You're going to Seattle?
Safe travels.
Thank you.
Bye, Paul. It's great.
He swears he can make it to Logan in an hour and a half. And I said, once you get to Boston, it's still 2 hours. to
Logan? Well, at 3:00, yikes.
Yeah.
I don't know what time his flight is. but-
There at 7 in the morning in an hour and a half.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have
too.
to, like Eddie.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but this is not looking.
No, this is, no. Oops.
You count that Boston traffic be going 90 miles an hour on the left lane.
I don't.
Yeah.
think about that. Okay, so we have a plan. We've made a motion. We'll put that forward at our next meeting of the whole town. And are we ready to move on then from multifamily housing, or do we have more to discuss
Just
about
have a
that?
comment,
Yeah.
a question. How do we create more jobs locally? I mean, I saw this thing for Windsor and he said, all these things are going up for Windsor,
Yeah.
but that's where the jobs are. That
That's why
makes
we have an
sense.
economic development commission.
Is there an update that you can share with me that gives some hope?
I mean, I think
What can we produce here to get people to?
that
stay
that's
work local?
something, it
Our
is
scope.
something that the Economic Development Commission works on. You know, I think, and certainly they could come and have a chat with the PZC at some point, and talk about what they're doing. I mean, there's only so much government can do, right?
Right.
To spur these
Yeah.
jobs on.
We did, I think like 2 years ago, have a report that talked about, was tied to the, it was tied to that economic, the tax incentive, for the one census district in Mansfield.
The opportunity
The
zone.
opportunity zone. We had a whole presentation about the opportunity zone, but I don't think we ended up having much come out of that.
Oh, yeah, we did. All
we?
this multifamily development.
That's what we got.
is-
Although, what came out of it?
The multifamily development is a result of this opportunity zone. I mean, you get there.
So how much of an incentive do they get?
I don't know, but I know that they get significant
It's 10%.
reduction in capital gains
Yeah, yeah.
if they hold it for 10 years.
Yeah.
So the good news is that if they're taking advantage of this opportunity zone, my understanding is that they have to hold on to their developments for 10 years. So that's good, right? You
There's
know,
an investment in it.
right, exactly.
Interesting. It's good to know. And that program's been continued, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're familiar about that, but Mansfield actually has the largest by area economic development zone in the state. And that's solely because that one census district, which largely contains a lot of unemployed students, helps us to meet that requirement. Well, it's honest, right?
Just funny living in a
It is.
university town.
It is. It's really weird, but yeah.
The pros and cons.
Yeah, but that's a good question. Okay, so we'll move on then. And I see Michael had to leave, and we were hoping to get some updates about the Riparian corridor zoning. Do you have information about that?
So, yeah, Michael he's done a draft. I have sent that off to Tyke to look at. And I wanted to have staff work with Tyke to do a staff level review of that before I brought it to the commission. But Mike, I don't know if you've had a chance, if you have a 30,000, a bird's eye view of your thoughts on that. And realizing Michael Stankoff, who's done the bulk of the work, is not here to respond, but.
Yeah, I haven't gone through it yet. I'm looking, just pulled up the agenda and look at the bottom where you're talking about reviewing the schedule. And I think that all of this kind of fits in with, now that we know where things may go with the moratorium, like we want to kind of look at that. And I know I think I'd said to you, once we got through to this point, we'll put together something that we feel is updated and more reflective of what we can do. So, I mean, I think we can include that in there as well, but I don't have any immediate
Okay.
thoughts.
Wait on that until we get more, but that's good. That's moving forward. Okay, so then C is the keeping of farm animals working group update, but actually I think that's not our scope. We've been working in poultry exclusively, but is that the group that you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about the poultry group.
Okay, okay, good, because I was just saying.
Yeah.
It falls under the keeping of animals section of the regs.
Gotcha, okay,
And
gotcha.
it's hard.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
is hard.
And I can give a quick update on that. Julian's created a really nice spreadsheet with categories of importance to the things that we're looking at. We looked at a number of different towns and are filling in that chart to get a sense of the variety of different kinds of poultry regulations out there. I was filling in a few today. You have filled in a few. You filled in and added some as well. I think we're up to 8 towns now. It might be more than that. And none of them are like Mansfield. There isn't a town out there that has the kinds of issues and things that we have. But we've tried to kind of circle around as far as rural communities, more urban, those that are denser, those that have the kind of sort of rural suburban interface that we have. And honestly, looking at that, I have not seen any coherent pattern. It seems to be more related to, I would say, the issues that have come up from enforcement more than anything. And what we're dealing with really is this sort of dynamic changing interface of a rural community that's moving into a more suburban community. And that's where the conflicts are happening, is where you have people who would like to keep poultry, conflicting with people who would like to sleep in the morning, basically. And so, you know, what we're gonna basically do is, I think, go through and look at those different things, because there are some towns that have absolutely very specific regulations about every aspect of poultry keeping you can imagine. And there are towns that are much broader or vaguer. And we'll hopefully look at. the
Or say
kinds of
nothing.
enforcement issues that you're dealing with, so that we can, you know, have some respect for the people that are seeing issues and problems, and try to craft something that will get us there. And so I think we have a plan to meet. I can't remember what our next meeting date is.
I don't think we scheduled one.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
so I will do that. I'll
I
send an
did
email.
find it interesting that in 2021, that the town of Tolland is
Mhm.
using our Mansfields.
yep.
So we have Mike here. Mike, did you work on that Tolland poultry regulation in 2021?
We talked, we talked about it and we looked at it. I didn't pen it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we've talked about this in Wellington as well. We've talked, I mean, these chickens, man, in every freaking place. And I do sort of agree that it's as much about enforcement and what issues have come up as it is about the specific people that have these animals on their property and how well they manage them. And if it comes to the forefront or it doesn't, I'm racking my brain to know if there's like a gold standard of set of regs, and nothing really comes to mind. I know I reviewed a bunch when we wrote them in Willington.
Yeah, we have looked at the state guide. There's a state guide that came out from the Department of Agriculture that has, I think, some pretty good solid recommendations about things. And we'll meet and go through things and hash out something soon, I think in the next.
So we're not finding any patterns yet. That makes sense.
No, and that's
Are there
not surprising.
pups, chickens, or is it just the
We're
noise?
talking roosters.
There
It's
are
always-
so there are very few complaints related to chickens.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Just checking.
And coop locations and setbacks
Yeah.
but a
and-
lot of towns put the burden back on the zoning agent, back in the planning, that, we don't want to create more work for an apartment.
Yeah, for some-
If
yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
because clearly there's a lot of towns that say, you know, less than 2 acres, you need to go to get a special permit.
Right.
And
Yep.
you'll be running
You don't wanna
around
deal with
all day long.
Like a chicken with our head cut off.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah, and I'm surprised at the number of towns that I've seen that require a zoning permit to keep poultry, period.
Well,
And that seems like also something that would not fly here. Pun intended, so.
Our current regulations are looking pretty good.
Well, yeah.
Well, not really, because we need to deal with the small lots and we need to deal with roosters.
Yeah,
But still.
and I think that, I think the way that this will probably go is that we may have some restrictions on roosters in certain zones. And that seems reasonable,
Yeah.
given the enforcement issues that we're having and the complaints we're having and the way people passionately feel about poultry.
And the way, and we're still seeing low, I hate to say lower, but it's true. We're still seeing lower income people move into more affordable units in Mansfield, which are the smaller lots, and their expectation of what they're going to experience in their everyday life is different.
Sure,
No one says, hey, you're moving to a farm town, there's gonna be a rooster.
that's right.
So they find out too late.
Yep.
And I mean, there are plenty of examples of where people keep chickens on small lots, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like they do
Hens are
in
not
New
a
York,
problem.
and
Yeah.
chickens are, like, we want to be able to, if people want to raise eggs and they're doing it in
Yeah,
a way that is not a nuisance to their neighbors, then
yeah, I don't see
valid,
that,
right?
I don't see us heading towards any kind of restriction.
No, your neighbors might not even know. The neighbors
Exactly.
probably don't even
Who
know.
cares? Yeah.
So if you did have a restriction on it, then you're gonna make people.
Right, yeah.
You're gonna create problems.
Yeah, so I think
And-
actually I think we'll be able to do this, and it shouldn't be, it should accomplish the major things that we need to do.
We're just being punished for the process.
It's interesting, actually. It's interesting. And one thing that I'm noticing, and maybe you guys are seeing this too, or you and I are seeing it because we don't look at regs every single day, is how frustrating it is to have a town that has very unorganized regulations and trying to locate the information they need.
And how many towns are like that? What have they been doing the last decade?
Yeah. Well.
They haven't hired Tyke.
Exactly.
Hey,
Yeah.
Mansfields look great compared to these other towns.
Just you wait till you get on Eco 360. Wait.
Job security, yes, for techie. Okay, so there we are. All right. And then our next on our agenda is affordable housing fee in lieu. Were we doing anything with that today?
Well, not today. I just
Okay.
wanted to, I staff the Affordable Housing Committee, and that's just something that has been very much at the forefront of what they talk about. So I wanted to, bring it up to this group.
Mhm.
I think the Planning and Zoning Commission has been pretty direct in saying that you really want to see these units built on site.
Yep.
And that's my message to developers. In some instances that may not be appropriate.
Mhm.
So if you look at 15% and how much that costs to build on site, restricted over 40 years versus your percentage that you're requiring for fee in lieu, it's that percentage. While it seems like, oh wow, we got $1.7 million, it's
Low.
really low. So it's something just you should be, that I think that's the message from the Affordable Housing Committee.
Okay, let's look at that. Should we just put that in on our list for something to bring up in the next? Didn't we just do this? I feel like we just went through
You did, you just increased the percentage, but I think to
Of-
Michael's point, to Mike
affordable housing.
D'Amato's point is like to go into item E where he talks
Okay.
about
Yeah.
how we move forward. And hopefully that's gonna all,
But I know clearly recently, and for me, recent is like the last 4 years, we did look at different towns with their fee in lieu and think about whether or not we should raise that or not. That was fairly recent, wasn't it?
well, yeah, because before you never had
we
affordable housing
established
regs.
it, okay.
Yeah, and so I think there aren't very many towns that have even, mandatory. I think more and more they're doing the set asides, but fee in lieu, Mike, I mean, how
It's
many
all
towns have a
about-
fee in lieu?
It's
many.
not many, and it almost always comes down to they pay the fee if they save money. They're not going to pay the fee if it's going to cost them more. So if you're getting a fee, it means that you are just collecting a fraction of what it's going to cost you to. I mean, there are some benefits to not having the administration of having to do income verification and vet all these folks and do that management if they just want to build it and walk. But a lot of times, and we've seen this, we did some reviews on a couple of towns. One like as far away from Mansfield as Brantford, and they wanted this fee, and the cost from a construction standpoint, they didn't have standards. So they basically said, we're going to back into it from a construction standpoint, dollar for dollar. The developers like this folds the whole project, right?
Mhm.
The expectation is that there's going to be some cost defrayed by someone else. And that is a challenge. And though it is an option, for some reason, there seems to be a sense that asking the developer to buy down a restriction on another unit in town is not sort of the gold standard. And it certainly is an option. At Mass, they do it a lot, I think, in Mass. You could sort of look at it almost like a transfer of development rights and identify locations that are sort of a receiving areas that they might be able to purchase these restrictions. But I think the idea is you're building this brand new, bright and shiny, accessible housing, and you're going to be buying down restrictions in older areas that have, don't have the amenities or the finishes.
The issues right there. Right. Yeah.
But
Get rid of what?
Well,
But
then,
the Affordable Housing Commission liked it.
I think they want it to be higher.
well, I think they,
Yes.
we need money
Yeah,
somehow,
it meets.
right? So where are we gonna get that money? And, fee in lieu is one way to get that money.
Mhm.
I mean, another way is to charge they've talked about why does affordable housing always have to go on the backs of developers, right?
Mhm. Right, that's what I was
That's
saying
what
about the
money
town
is.
council could
Yeah.
start.
I mean, they should bear some of the
Yeah.
burden, but I don't know, that's a policy decision, right?
Yeah.
How much burden should they bear?
Mhm, mhm.
it's certainly something that will potentially, a discussion that will be informed by what shakes out through this moratorium process. you're beyond the 10% now, which is good because that means that you're actually going to add to the units rather than just maintain the status quo. So I think that is, the faucet is at least turned down, if not off, by doing that. And once we figure out what the approach will be to the multifamily stuff, I think that may help inform that, make that conversation easier.
We calculated sort of the difference, but what the fee in lieu is versus what a developer is actually giving up in rental income over 40 years.
Well, those numbers are kind of hard to
They're
kind
changing all
of
the
to drill
time.
down,
Right.
but it's if you Paul Stern,
He was the one who would seem to do that.
he's done a lot of work on that, and it's a lot of money.
That's
If you're
yeah.
thinking that, yeah, it's just a lot of money that they're
Like a
giving,
crazy amount of money.
that they're giving up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
So
they expect them
that's
to,
why, I mean, I get the call all the time, will you consider fee in lieu? And I said, well, it's in our regulations, but I've heard from the Planning and Zoning Commission that they really want to see this on site. So, but there's going to be instances where that's not appropriate. So, or where the developer's really going to push back, or, where you're going to have to. So.
Stay tuned.
yeah,
Exactly.
complicated.
And I think I'm not trying to jump ahead, but I also have a 3:15 and I don't want to be rude and leave without stuff that's on the agenda pertains to me. Regarding E, I think if it makes sense on your side, I think that we should put together an updated schedule for how we want to attack these things based upon kind of where we are. That keeps in mind codification and the moratorium, and just kind of pulls all that together. Obviously, a lot has changed since we put it together initially, and we want to bear in mind reality and the ability to get this done with everything else that's in the hopper. So I think we had suggested previously, and it would be on our side homework to put together sort of an updated look ahead, if that makes sense.
Great.
As much as I'd rather just spend the next 5 years just doing this and meeting every couple of weeks and litigating these issues, I think you probably want to get it done. So I just want to make sure it's realistic so that if you do get these things that you have sort of potentially pending, it's not too overwhelming and, not overly ambitious.
So with
Can I
that,
let Mike go?
I think we can let Mike go.
Yep.
So we'll, aside from the schedule, we'll put together sort of an official, we'll write something up so that you can have it in go out in the packets for Thursday, right?
Yes, please.
Okay. We can do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess we're at number 4, public comment. Do we have anyone on the line who would like to make any comments?
We do have one member of the public under communications.
Yes.
This individual also submitted a letter that I had forwarded out to you before the meeting. And he is the developer from Wilmerite, who is
Correct.
Yes, and I feel like we addressed this with our exclusion of the PV4 zone from the moratorium.
Mhm.
I think that should accomplish that.
You'll be happy with that.
Yeah, and I think our reasoning for that is solid. Okay. All right, were there any other comments or questions or anything anyone wanted to bring up?
I have a question generally. Last week, the US Supreme Court removed protections for inland waterways.
Yeah.
And our
Well,
town,
and it's more, yeah, I think it's complicated. I'm hoping
I can talk.
our lawyer can
you can talk about
help
that?
us.
Yeah, if you'd like that, if you'd like to. So it is complicated, but what it basically does is it changes the federal definition
Yeah,
of what is covered. And this is at the federal level, but
mm,
in all practical matters for the state of Connecticut, because our Connecticut Inland Wetlands Act is very stringent, it will change nothing in the state.
Okay.
It's possible that there are some places that may come into play, but in all likelihood, it won't change it. It certainly won't change anything in Mansfield with the way wetlands are addressed.
Okay.
What it basically does is a previous court case called Rapanos looked at how the feds are defining what's a wetland, and they're trying to find a way to say that it's a physical connection. So you've got the Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River goes into the Ohio River, the Allegheny, some little stream, and then there's a wetland beside that little stream. And if there's a direct physical surface level connection, that's where we are right now with the new ruling in Stackett that says that then that wetland can be regulated. Previously, they said if it was adjacent, but probably has an interaction, it could be regulated, but that has now been changed to basically direct surface. And what a problem is not so much for us on the East Coast, it's way a big problem in the West, because in the West, you've got an awful lot of disconnected wetlands that absolutely have a biological, a chemical, a subsurface hydrologic connection to other, what they call waters of the United States. WOTUS.
yeah,
Is it?
Really?
Yeah.
WOTUS. Yeah, big on acronyms, we are the, yeah. And for those wetlands, they are now no longer subject to federal protection. And that's really problematic
because
because
it's the states where you don't have a strong,
state level, Inland Wetlands Act. And what's interesting about Connecticut is that that's 50 years old. I mean, Connecticut was the first state to have their own state level inland wetlands protections. And it's been a gold standard actually throughout the nation. So, we're actually in pretty good shape. It's possible that there are some areas in the state that may now suddenly not be protected, but not likely.
but anything like that, when the Army Corps looks at something
Yes.
like the waters of the United States, like if it's over an acre of that may impact us, right? But I'm not,
It's possible, but I think the state level regs are still going to apply. So
We won't have any legal challenges or,
no, it's not. I mean, that's not really my area of expertise. So, but as far as Mansfield goes, it really won't change the way we do our job. And
because the way we define
Yeah.
wetlands has nothing really to do with water, it's soil type.
Yep.
I mean, so
Yeah.
it's all based on soil
Okay.
type. Now, a water course is something different, but that also has a pretty clear and strong definition.
Yes.
And then there's also an intermittent water course, which
And
has
pools, which in Connecticut
our water courses.
are water courses. They're
so the
different,
riparian overlay will take that all into consideration?
Yep. Sort of.
Well, the riparian just means adjacent
To what?
to a stream
The stream.
or
Moving
water.
is
Yeah,
riparian.
yeah.
Moving water.
Yeah. And so, what the big issue in the West is these, adjacent but not connected wet areas.
It's like vernal pools,
Vernal pools, like bogs,
marshes,
things like that may or may.
a red maple marsh, a swamp rather, like that we
Yeah,
would,
perched wetlands. Yeah, things like that. So.
spring fed.
Yeah, yep. Also, all of that stuff now is potentially open for, or has stripped away protection, is maybe a better way to put it. But
You what?
well, the problem is that they're not scientists, and
I was
they use
thinking,
no
how do they make
science-based
decisions?
definitions to figure that out whatsoever.
Was this just a couple trying to build their house, right?
Well, so that's another problem entirely. So the Sacketts got screwed. And that should never have gotten beyond the district court. So the problem is that the case is terrible and that they absolutely should have been able to build their house without encountering these regulations. They were applied in a really ridiculous way. So, that's the problem. But the problem is that then when they took it to district court, the argument that they used was not that the way it was applied was inappropriate. They were funded by a anti-regulation think tank who took an argument that attacked directly the Rapanos, the Supreme Court decision that basically had this adjacency. Yeah, and so that's why it was problematic, because the court then didn't want to overturn Rapanos, and so to not overturn that but keep the regulations in, they had to deny the sackets. So it's just a really stupid way that the legal system was applied in a very complicated manner. But the bottom line is it doesn't really apply to us too much. So
Good.
And
But great
we
question.
did stray a little bit from the agenda, but
yeah, sorry about that.
it's okay.
Educational.
I have a question under future meetings.
Yep.
July 11th, how's everyone's availability looking?
That's a Tuesday, right? Just
Yep,
this time. Yeah,
Tuesday.
I will be here.
I'm here.
Okay, because we are hitting the summer months.
Fine.
A couple meetings ago, we talked about asking Mike to print out some maps. Do you know if he did that?
Michael Stankoff?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's done a lot of mapping, and he, I think I'd like to just sort of frame his discussion with after going over with Mike D'Amato, because he does have all the maps and how, but
I just asked for a printed map of those. zones.
of the zones?
Yeah.
Yeah, he offered them to us.
Oh, okay, yeah,
That's
we
awesome.
can get those.
Yeah.
You want big ones, big map, a big zoning map,
It doesn't like big enough that I can actually read it.
like 11 by 17?
That would be great.
Oh, yeah, that's easy.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to have a current one too.
Yeah, sure. We just, if they're right on
Bigger than this.
the, okay.
Are we done?
Yes, and so we can be adjourned. Before we adjourn, I would like to make a note that Bill came in a little bit late, that Bill's Miko came in a bit late, and it's on the, got that,
I
okay.
saw Jolene move.
And excellent, okay, so we are adjourned at 3:20 p.m.
Okay.
If you guys, because we're getting so many different, if you send emails to me, I'm gonna remember